that where on Sunday mornings the minister would come up and do an opening prayer, and then somebody would come up and make announcements, and the minister would leave the sanctuary and come back in time to give his Sunday lesson. And there was a newcomer that after a couple of weeks said to the minister, he said, "I've never seen anybody take a coffee break so quick." Of course, the minister was going to give the children's lesson in Sunday school. So what does it say that I'm talking about today?
Use the principle,
pay it forward. Pay it forward. Well, you know, it's real interesting that I give these wonderful talk titles to Mary Jane, who is in Brooksville celebrating her grandson's birthday. And I gave it to Deborah, and Deborah, the music you picked was superb, was splendid. Paying it forward. And so the creative process for me is on Friday and Saturday, I kind of come up with stuff, and then on Saturday night, I kind of squish it together. And yesterday afternoon, my granddaughter-in-law called me and said she was bringing the great-grandkids to come see me. And I said, "Great." And I went to tell Gerald, I said, "The kids will be here at 5. And he said, "I'm going to the church at 5. And I looked at him and I said, "What am I forgetting?" He said, "Daniel Nahman." So my squishing together, my washing machine time for what I'm speaking about was spent here last night with 75 wonderful people having a wonderful concert. And so when I went to bed last night, I took my papers and I set them over the side. And so this morning, while we're doing this, I'm writing notes on my little affirmation card. Because what happens is when I start out with an idea, it percolates and it begins to grow and expand and have little tentacles out into Never Never Land. And so I kept with this topic of paying it forward, where I had one idea. I kept being pulled back toward what is it that we do here. We teach spiritual principles to help us live our lives, to help us be a witness, so that our lives are a witness. I had the opportunity last night to tell someone, she said something to me that made me respond to her, that said, always being sweet and right and doing right and being perfect is not what got me here. You know, there was a walk to get here. There was life to be lived. And I couldn't be here if I hadn't had all of the things that went on in my journey. They were the things that caused me to learn and to grow, the things that caused me to stretch, the things that caused me to look beyond the next party. And so when I think about paying it forward, what I realize is that in order to pay it forward, you have to have had life. In order to pay it forward, you have to have some it to give. And so what is the it? And I go back to our spiritual principles that there is only one presence and one power in my life. And that no matter what is going on, that presence and that power is what sustains me. It is the heart of me. It is that which lets me walk one more step. It is that part of me that lets me be there when you are taking the steps. It's It's that part of me that grabs the moments to sit down and be still. That lets me read and reflect. That lets me have a greater spiritual understanding. That's the it that I have to pay forward. That's the it that you have to pay forward with. And I think back about our co-founders, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. I mean, she had this tremendous healing need, and she had this healing, and they began to pray for their neighbors. And they were just ordinary people. They had no seminary training. But they were experiencing life, and they were continuing one step at a time through the valley. And Charles had that idea, I can sit down and I can go to headquarters. And every night, even though he didn't see results initially, every night he would sit down at 10 o'clock and go to headquarters, spend time in the silence. And out of that, here we are, all these years later, with an organization where people are in prayer 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for over 100 years. If you have a prayer need, there's an app on your phone, Now Pray. There's 1-800 Now Pray. Someone will pray with you at any moment. They'll answer the phone, Silent Unity, how may I pray with you? And you can say, I have a healing need, and will you tell me your name, your first name? And then they pray with you. They're there to do that. And so they're there to pay it forward, because there's that bedrock that they have established. This is in the middle of a series called Jesus Today. And Jesus yesterday came out of the New Testament, and before that, his belief system came out of the Old Testament. And so going back into the Old Testament, talking about that getting to the bedrock, they had a sign, a story that they told that tells us that they went to headquarters. And it's one of the stories out of the Old Testament is Moses. Moses has been brought up by the Egyptians, and he slays an Egyptian soldier, and he runs away. And he runs, and he is working for his cousin, I think. And he's being a shepherd, and he's out in the wilderness, having a wilderness experience. Haven't we all had a wilderness experience? Don't we know people who are having wilderness experiences? And he comes to a mountain. It's Horeb, and on this mountain there's this bush that begins to burn and is not consumed. And there he has this mountaintop experience. He meets with God. And he's called to start paying it forward, to start doing for others, getting there from that principle of God within us, that we can always communicate with God, that God communicates with us. Another of our principles, getting out there to pay it forward, which is our fifth principle. You got to do something with it when you get it. completely lost. So there was another mountaintop experience. Moses had another mountaintop experience. Can any of you remember what it was? 10 Commandments. That's right. That's what I was thinking, trying to think of. Didn't say that there. Didn't say that at all. But he was called to go to the mountain to get the rules. And for 7 days, there was a cloud at the top of the mountain. Now, 7 days, number 7 has some significance. The 7 days of creation, the time it takes for something to happen. After 7 days, the cloud clears. And then Moses spends 40 days and 40 nights with God, getting the 10 Commandments. Now, have we heard of 40 days and 40 nights anywhere else in the Bible? Time it takes, yeah. So, mountains, numbers that are significant. They're significant, they repeat because they're saying, looky, this is something to pay attention to. I had a chemistry teacher that I made great grades in his class because every time he was going to say something that was on the test, he took the chalk and tapped the chalkboard. And I caught on. If he tapped the chalkboard, it was going to be on the test. So in the Bible, every time they get this number 7 out, the time they get the 40 days and the 40 nights out, every time there's a mountain, it's saying, pay attention. There is something important here, something that you need to pay attention to. Another mountaintop experience. My licensed Unity teachers are going to help me with this one. It's one of the E guys. Elijah. So Elijah is a prophet, and he manages to really irritate another biblical character, Jezebel. And the way he does that is because he causes all of the priests in the temple of Baal to be killed. And so Jezebel is appropriately irked. And so Elijah flees. And he has this moment of reckoning out in the wilderness. I wanted the people of Israel to do what was right, and I resorted to killing all of the priests. Oh, I'm no better than anybody else. Oh my God. He had this moment of, oh, I'm not good enough. Look what I've done. And I'm not quite certain, but I believe it was an angel that instructed him to go up on the mountain and get in a cave because the Lord was coming by. And when he gets in the cave, there is this great wind that comes by that breaks up the stones and the mountains and causes stuff. Maybe it was like a earthquake, I don't know. But Elijah got really clear that that stuff was not God. Because after the wind passed and after the rocks crumbled, there was this deep silence. And Elijah knew that God was in that still, small voice inside, in the quiet. And so our fella Jesus, our brother, our guy, grew up hearing these stories about mountaintop experiences, about hearing about the importance of going apart. Before he began his ministry, what did he do? He went out in the desert for how long? 40 days and 40 nights. He went through the temptations before he began to pay it forward. Another time in the Bible where Jesus is on the mountain, as he goes up to the mountain to pray, and when he comes down, he delivers the Sermon on the Mount. And it's been said that if all of the rest of the Bible were destroyed and all we had was the Sermon on the Mount, we'd still have the essence. The purity, the sweetness, the love, the spiritual direction that we need. And you remember what he did after he gave the Sermon on the Mount? Well, he did loaves and fishes, but after the Sermon on the Mount, he went back and prayed again. And meantime, while he's there praying, the disciples begin their trek across the sea. Set up a story for you? And they're on a sea and they're doing like that, and here walks Jesus, and he stills and calms the storm. The purpose of going through all those little stories is that for you and I to have what it takes to pay it forward, we have to get some it for ourselves. We have to have some mountaintop experiences. And we can get those mountaintop experiences in many ways, and probably most of you have had some kind of mountaintop experience in your life, and that's why you're sitting here today. Andrea DeMichaelis and I went to the Monroe Institute and spent a week there. Oh my gosh, did I have a mountaintop experience. There was a moment when, in the middle of all this time of week of meditation, that I had this vision of sitting on the front porch of the universe. And it is a vision that I hold. I can feel, I can put myself in that feeling. I can remember it. And there are other mountaintop experiences. I had a mountaintop experience not too long ago. See, your board of trustees, and if you're a board of trustee member and you're here, would you just stand up very quickly? Just, and some of them are here today, and some were here last night. Thank you. And you may and you're here. You're not back there. So your board of trustees has been here way more than they ever expected this last year. Tim, you past board president, they've been here hours, days, calls, emails. So I had, a couple of months ago, I had a mountaintop experience in a funny way. It was a Tuesday, first Tuesday of the month. We have worship team, Ann Bolton and all of our licensed Unity teachers, and you know, we're Suzette or Paul and Pam and Deborah. We get together and we talk about what we're going to do. And they think I know. And they're there to help me know. Let's put it that way. They're there to help me know what we're going to do. So we have this worship team meeting. So we have noon prayer, we have the worship team meeting, and then there's the final push to get all the things copied for the board meeting, and because it's on Tuesday and the accountants finished it on Monday, we got a copy, and we got to get the agenda done, and the board meeting starts at 6:30. And I will just say that we've had some board meetings that went longer than one would care to be there. And not because we don't love each other. And not because if there's any argument. There's no this, that, and like that. I mean, it's just reading through contracts. Ooh. Looking at plans. I like it, but ooh, for an hour or two. I mean, we've handled some heavy stuff. So one night we adjourned at 9:45. So I've had a pretty full day here. And I love you guys. But when I drove out of that parking lot, I was glad to leave. And Gerald had asked me earlier, what did I want for dinner? And I said, I don't know. I don't think we're going to be too long tonight. He said, let's go out after the board meeting. So I'm driving down to Wickham and I call him. And I'm saying, I don't think I can go out. I think it's too late. And so we agree that I'll just drive through Burger King. And so I drive through Burger King, and when I get to the window, there are two young people there, and they're just giggling. And they hand me my food, and I say, how much? And they say, the person before you paid for it. I said, wow. And I said, well, how much is the guy after me? And it was way less than I'd have paid. And so I give them the $6, and they were ecstatic. And the young man said, you make 15. And I was touched, not so much that somebody paid my $11.74, but it was nice. But it was the Spirit. The Spirit had taken over those kids. They were so happy. They were giggling. If the lights on Burger King were almost dimmed by their light, because they were participating in something bigger than just selling burgers. They were touched. They had an experience. I had an experience because somebody paid it forward. 14 cars ahead. There was a little boy who I'm wondering if he has a name. No. Well, yeah, he does. His name is Howard. And he's selling goods door to door to help pay for his family's bills and to have food. And that particular day, his sales were pretty nothing. He had no money and he was hungry. And as he approached the next house, he thought, oh, I am so hungry. He said, I'll ask for a glass of water. He couldn't bring himself to ask for food. And the lady answered, and he showed her what he had to sell, and he said, may I have a glass of water? And that lady that looked at him, and she saw his hunger. And so she gave him this big glass of milk. And he sat there and drank the milk, and he said, I'll come back and pay you for that. That was so good. And she said, no, honey. You don't have to come back and pay me back. She said, pay it forward. 20 years later, the same woman was in a hospital. And she was dying. She had an unusual illness. And the only specialist that was known that could help her was called in, Dr. Howard Kelly. Meantime, she gets better. She doesn't know who he is. And she's sitting there worried about this bill. She's been in the hospital for weeks and weeks. And she's thinking, I will never be able to get out of debt. And the hospital brings her bill. And it says, paid in full for 1 glass of milk. Dr. Howard Kelly. So this week, I'm going to invite you to look for those opportunities to have your own mountaintop experience. That experience where you go inside and you hear the voice of God. I'm going to invite you to have a mountaintop experience of paying it forward. You all got a thrill when I said, they told me that they'd paid for my burger. We can do that every day. Sometimes it's not in the money. It's in our presence. It's in our presence when our friends need us. It's in our smile when we go through the grocery store. If Jesus were here today, he'd be having mountaintop experiences, and I believe he'd be paying it forward.